Imagine a world where sex and slaughter went hand in hand. The Aztecs didn't just worship their gods with flowers or incense. They offered blood, skin, and flesh. Intimacy was never private. It was ritual, cosmic, and drenched in gore. What happened in the bed could end on the altar, and what happened on the altar often began in the bed. Tonight, we'll peel back the obsidian curtain to reveal the twisted passion plays of an empire where pleasure and pain were inseparable. Welcome to the shocking intimacy rituals of the Aztecs. Virgin offerings to the sun. Picture this: a young woman, dressed in brilliant feathers and painted with sacred dyes, walking through a cheering crowd. To the untrained eye, it looks like a royal wedding procession. She shines like a bride on her big day, except her groom is not a man. It's the sun itself, and the honeymoon suite is a blood-soaked altar carved from volcanic stone. The Aztecs didn't prize virginity for its innocence or chastity. No, virgins were the most valuable currency in a cosmic economy where gods were always hungry. These girls weren't wives in the making, they were meals. The priests promised that their sacrifice would keep Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, strong enough to drag daylight across the sky. Without their blood, the world risked collapsing into eternal night. Talk about pressure to perform. The ceremony blurred love and death into one grotesque pageant. While modern brides toss bouquets, these brides of the sun offered their throats. Their screams weren't ignored. They were the soundtrack of salvation. And when the obsidian knife tore through flesh, purity wasn't preserved. It was devoured. The message was clear. In Aztec romance, the only happily ever after was making sure tomorrow's sun actually rose. The fertility orgies of Xochiquetzal. Now imagine a festival where restraint wasn't just frowned upon, it was criminal. When the Aztecs honored Xochiquetzal, the goddess of love, fertility, and 1,000 awkward pregnancies, they turned the entire city into one giant state-sanctioned orgy. Picture streets lined with flowers, drums pounding like a heartbeat, and bodies tangled in a sweaty, chaotic mess that made modern music festivals look like Sunday school. Everyone joined in: farmers, nobles, even priests. The goddess demanded indulgence, and the Aztecs delivered. But here's where it got dark. The party always came with a bill. After hours of passion and chaos, the priests swept through the exhausted masses, plucking chosen ones for sacrifice. Their reward for pleasing Xochiquetzal, having their hearts ripped out before dawn. The line between ecstasy and execution was paper thin, and nobody knew whether they'd wake up next to a lover or face first on an altar. Think of it as spring break in Cancun, except the hangover isn't a bad tattoo or food poisoning. It's your still-beating heart held high above the crowd, dripping for the gods. Pleasure was never free. Desire itself was debt, and the interest was paid in blood. Priests and sacred seduction. And if you thought the orgies were shocking, wait until you meet the priests. These weren't celibate monks hiding in dusty cloisters. Some Aztec priests were chosen to become living gods. They wore divine masks, carried sacred staffs, and were even assigned lovers' human partners who played the role of celestial consorts. Sounds glamorous, right? Being the girlfriend or boyfriend of a god. Until you realize the relationship came with a strict expiration date. The rules were cruel. As long as the priest embodied a god, the intimacy was real, ritualized, and celebrated. But when the cycle ended, so did the lover's life. One night you're wrapped in silk and feathers, treated as divine royalty. The next morning, you're laid bare on the temple steps, gutted for the crowd, your blood feeding the hungry earth. Love was not a fairy tale, it was a contract with an obsidian knife waiting at the signature line. Romance, Aztec style, always came with a kill switch. No happily ever after, no quiet retirement together. Just one final date at dawn where the priest prays, the drums thunder, and your heart is yanked free like the bill at a very expensive restaurant. Blood as the ultimate aphrodisiac. Forget roses, forget perfume. Aztec lovers had a different idea of foreplay. Their ultimate turn-on? Blood. Lovers sliced themselves with sharp obsidian blades, offering drops of crimson as tokens of devotion. It wasn't enough to whisper sweet nothings, you had to bleed for your partner. In their eyes, nothing was more erotic than proving love by dripping it onto the ground, or better yet, onto each other's skin. Picture it: a moonlit courtyard, two lovers pressed close, and instead of exchanging jewelry, they're handing over knives. A cut on the tongue, a slash across the thigh, the sting of pain mingling with gasps of pleasure. Blood wasn't taboo, it was divine currency, the perfume of the gods, and the very essence of life. And if the gods found it arousing, who were mortals to disagree? It's the kind of date where flowers wilt, chocolates melt, but a scar that lasts forever. To the Aztecs, intimacy without blood was incomplete, like a song missing its final note. In their world, to love was to bleed, and if you weren't bleeding, you probably weren't loving hard enough. The bridal sacrifice weddings, in Aztec culture, weren't always about cake and awkward dancing. Sometimes the bride wasn't marrying a man at all, she was marrying a god. Imagine being pampered like royalty, dressed in jewels and feathers, carried through the streets as the city celebrated your divine union. For days you were treated like a queen, dined on the finest food, honored as the sacred wife of eternity. Sounds like a dream wedding, right? Until you remember how Aztec honeymoons ended. Because this marriage was never built for happily ever after. The final vow was spoken not in whispers, but in screams. The bride was laid across the temple altar, her body painted, her heart carved out in a violent climax meant to consummate the bond between mortal and deity. In this twisted ritual, the husband never touched her, the gods only consumed. So while today's couples argue about whose family to invite, Aztec brides faced a more pressing question. Would they leave the temple in bridal silks or in pieces? For them, matrimony wasn't about love, loyalty, or family. It was about feeding the heavens. Till death do us part, emphasis on death. The midnight cannibal feast. And just when you think it can't get any darker, the Aztecs set the table. Because for them, sacrifice didn't always end with blood on the altar, it ended with flesh on the plate. After great festivals of passion and death, the bodies of the sacrificed were sometimes cooked, seasoned, and served at ritual banquets. Imagine a lover's feast where the main course wasn't lamb or pork, but human thigh, roasted and shared like Holy Communion. Cannibalism wasn't seen as monstrous, it was sacred. By eating the flesh of the sacrificed, nobles believed they were consuming divine power, making the gods part of their own bodies. What modern couples call sharing a meal took on a whole new meaning when the entree stared back at you hours earlier. The body wasn't just food, it was intimacy, it was union. It was proof that nothing of the offering went to waste. Picture candlelight, drums echoing in the night, and a ceremonial stew pot bubbling with human remains. The Aztecs didn't just feast with their gods, they feasted on them. And for them, nothing said romance quite like swallowing the divine, bite by bloody bite. The Aztecs saw no boundary between the bedroom and the altar. To them, love without blood was meaningless, and blood without love was incomplete. Pleasure, pain, sacrifice, and sex all fed into one endless ritual that kept the universe turning. Today we call it grotesque, barbaric, unthinkable. But for the Aztecs, life itself was a cosmic romance written in blood. So the next time you complain about a bad date, remember, at least it didn't end with your heart in someone else's hands.